Government cannot be a buffer between rich and poor. Neither can government be a scapegoat for those who don't want to wake up and do what they need to do. Cannot be. So business must take the responsibility of saying, we are making the money. The environment has been created for us to do that. But there's a whole sea of people who've been left out of this process, who want to also get up and be able to do things for themselves. However, that history, that, by the way, some people don't want us to talk about it anymore. They think, you're taking us back. No, we don't want to take anybody back. All we want is to say, recognize that history. Think of the fact that Mandela said, never again, it mustn't happen again. You're keeping it because you want to also use it as a gauge of how far you have been able to travel as people. And when I say so, it's not just for black people or white people, it's for all South Africans. All South Africans must take that responsibility. Those that I say must also not use government as a scapegoat. I'm even talking about my own. Because if Given is able to say, the BEE policies and the intention of BEE is a good thing. However, we need to relook at it and see if it is producing the entrepreneurs that Gordon Institute of Business Science is talking about. Let us also look at saying, because I make this example that my grandmother, I like telling the story of my grandmother because my grandmother was a domestic worker. She used to work in Parktown. So Parktown, I think, used to be the space where they had these families that were a little bit well off. So when she retired from being a domestic worker, she thought she would be a hawker. She started being a hawker, coming to Johannesburg, to Small Street to buy things, go back and sell. And by that time, we were already in exile in Swaziland. So she would come by and go back and sell. Then she realized that, hey, I'm not the only one who's doing this hawking business. And by the time my father was dead, I was 11 years old, there were 8 of us, and all we had in front of us was my grandmother and my grandfather, who used to work in Johannesburg, who lived in Denver hostel. My grandfather spent more than 50 years of his life living in hostels in Johannesburg. By the time he left us, this world, he didn't even have a roof over his head that he could at least, they are back from exile, here's a home. There was nothing like that. Now, I use this instance of my grandmother because I say to myself, when she decided that she was going to stop being a hawker, she was going to become a small business person. And this history of black women and men starting some little businesses is not just something for my grandmother. There's many others. There's many others who did the same. But she, unlike Given, didn't have no institution to go to, didn't have no government to go to. She didn't have nobody to go to. But if there's one thing that she did was, when she realized that she would take the taxi or the bus, they used to use the bus at the time, take the bus to go and do shopping to come and sell, she realized, there are too many of us doing this thing, I must find something for myself. My grandfather bought her a Singer sewing machine, it's still there, a Singer sewing machine, and she used the sewing machine to sew things. Then she realized that, no man, it looks like we are all sewing the same things. I must find something that nobody else is making. And you know what she found? She realized that no, in the 60s, 70s, there was no woman who walked out of home without a petticoat. Then she decided, this is my niche. She started making the petticoats. That's how she made the money. Now, I'm raising this issue because I'm thinking the economic toy that I'm talking about has got support. You've got a government that has now formed a small and medium enterprise ministry, a ministry whose sole responsibility is that of supporting small business. And by the way, I've been saying this since I came into office. Unfortunately, I'm getting calls from people who think government is sitting with a big bag of money, and that money is something that we are supposed to be distributing around. And I've said, it's not going to happen. It cannot happen because government doesn't have that bag of money. If somewhere along the line we made people believe that there's a bag of money somewhere, I'm here and I'm saying there's no bag of money. So if you come to our department as the Department of Small and Medium Enterprises and our ministry, we want people to come with a plan. And then we must be able to say to you, okay, le plan yakho le, there's this section of people who can try and help you to make this plan look good. Now, this is where the Institute and other people who are almost doing the same come in. We are talking of a spaza shop. I mean, imagine that the Gordon Institute of Science has got outreaches somewhere in the township where in the evenings, when maybe, no, the spaza doesn't close in the evening. That's when they make more money, actually. But you need to think about how do you bring this closer to the people who are thirsty for this knowledge, people who are thirsty for the assistance to understand how they run their business. My grandmother didn't have anybody to advise, but if there's one thing I can assure you, I was never chased away from school because school fees hadn't been paid. I never went to bed hungry. I never walked barefoot to school because she made sure that the uniform is there, she made sure that I'm fed, she made sure, and all the time, she didn't have all these fancy things that people have today. Now, your responsibility is then to consider also the fact that the people that we are talking about, yes, they have a government, yes, they've got access to many things, but however, many of them are crying out by saying that information is not available here. Sometimes we sit in our offices in Pretoria and we say, no, they'll go into the internet, no, they'll go. Many of them are in rural areas and they don't have that access. Those are some of the things that you need to think about.